Andy Carvin, come on up.
Thanks, Mika. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
So, what I wanted to do to start off was to rewind the clock by about 15 years. How many of you were on the internet back in 1995? Okay, a decent number of you, about half in the room. Back then, I was very involved with education technology and getting teachers involved with the internet. And I ran an email group for teachers for this purpose. And early that year, there was a major earthquake in Kobe, Japan. A lot of people died. There was a large amount of damage. And the people on my discussion list were very interested in figuring out a way to help. But there was a bit of a problem. The internet wasn't very mature at the time. Really, the only things you could do when it came to a disaster in the mid-90s were traditional ways of responding. You could either give blood or you could donate money. But online, that wasn't really possible yet. By 2001, though, people started figuring out ways to move forward and use the internet in more constructive ways. I'm going to pause this for just a second. For some reason, this is on auto advance, and it's going faster than I would like to talk. I know this doesn't look as pretty, but I'm going to do it this way just so we don't have to worry about auto advance. So on September 11th, when you had people trying to respond online, we still weren't in a position to do anything constructive in the sense of literally building tools yet. But what we could do is start sharing information. So you may recall that the hours after the September 11th attacks, there was a lot of misinformation being spread. For example, there were rumors being broadcast by major news organizations in the U.S. that there had been a bomb that had gone off in downtown D.C. Near the State Department as well as at the National Mall. And that wasn't true. I happened to be living in an apartment about 10 stories up, not too far from the State Department, and I had a very clear view down the road and could see there wasn't any smoke there. And prior to that day, there really wouldn't have been a way of sharing information in a quick way. So I set up an email discussion group on Yahoo called September 11 Info, and we very quickly started using it to answer questions like this. So when the media reports that there had been a bomb at the State Department, several of us were literally able to look outside with binoculars and see, no, that doesn't appear to be the case. And these weren't news organizations doing this type of reporting. This was a nascent form of citizen journalism. It was a way for us to help verify what was or wasn't going on and assist news organizations in their work. So essentially, the game had started to change at this point. Even though social media, as it's now known, was still somewhat immature online, we were beginning to learn how to use listservs, bulletin boards, and other tools as a way of getting information out during a disaster. So fast forward to 2004 and the Boxing Day tsunami. In that brief amount of time from 2001 to 2004, social media had begun to mature. Blogs had become more common. You had the development of Wikipedia. And it didn't take long for activists who were involved in disaster response to start learning to use these tools as well. For example, there was a group of bloggers, mostly in South Asia, but there were others throughout the world, who came together and created a blog called Tsunami Help about 24 hours after the Boxing Day tsunami. And for the first several days, this was probably the most reliable and most useful source of information coming from the disaster zone, because most mainstream media organizations didn't have a strong presence locally in South Asia. And so this became a way for people to gain access to what was going on, because people were posting reports on these blogs. That's the most unfortunate noise. We'll just have to plow through anyway. And in many ways, the Boxing Day tsunami was a wake-up call to the blogging community because they realized there was a role they could play in terms of disaster response. And this was seen just barely 9 months after the tsunami, when Hurricane Katrina struck the United States. I was involved in a project at that point called Katrina Aftermath, and the idea was to take a blog and treat it like a wiki so anyone could edit it. And the way we all set it up is you could send in emails that included text and photos, and all of that would be posted automatically. We also set up a voicemail system, so if you wanted to leave a message, you could record it, and it would automatically be posted as a podcast. And so as many people, including the woman who took this photo, as they were getting out of New Orleans and being able to catch their breath and tell their families what was going on, they were able to use tools like Katrina Aftermath as a way of reporting that they were okay. And so, again, as the social media tools advanced, it also expanded the way people were able to respond to a disaster. But things started getting really interesting starting in around 2007, 2008. If you think about the difference between 2005, 2008, we're talking only 3 years here. But that was when Facebook was born. That was when Twitter was born. And the internet had never had tools like that were so quick at sending information to large groups of people beyond, well beyond what a listserv could do, well beyond what a bulletin board could do. And so a hurricane was heading to the U.S. in August of 2008, and so I used Twitter to just casually ask a question. Is there anyone who'd want to help volunteer and pull together some tools? And within 48 hours, more than 500 people had signed up, saying that they wanted to build things. And so we ended up creating a resource called the Hurricane Information Center, or hurricane08.org. And this site, as you can see in the snapshot here, had Google Maps. It had real-time data of the storm. The maps included things such as evacuation routes, Red Cross shelters, and the like. And so what's really begun to change here is that people were now able to use the internet not just for sharing information, but for really collaborating as well. And there were so many people that had gotten interested in online collaboration when it comes to disasters. A group of them organized an unconference, a summit in Washington, D.C., just about over a year ago, called Crisis Camp, and where they had people from the Red Cross, the UN, aid groups, and people from the software development community to spend a day brainstorming of ways to work together. So when the Haiti earthquake happened, about 9 months after the summit, you had this network of people who were prepared to respond. And within 72 hours of the Haiti earthquake, they had organized what became known as crisis camps in half a dozen cities around the world, in Wellington, New Zealand, in London, in Washington, D.C., and several others. And these weren't just gatherings for people to come together and brainstorm. These were gatherings where software developers actually made tools. So, for example, they created the first ever mobile phone app for iPhone and for Android for translating Haitian Creole into English and English into Haitian Creole. They developed what became the most accurate post-earthquake map of Haiti. If you see in this picture, the very top frame shows what Google Map typically looks like for Port-au-Prince, Haiti. But below that, you see a snapshot of the open source map they created using OpenStreetMap. Google donated satellite imagery to make it possible for us to track every building that had collapsed, every refugee camp that had formed for displaced people. And all of that was done by literally several thousand volunteers. All of this data was made available to the general public and anyone else who wanted it as open source. Unfortunately, this isn't a very good photo. It's somewhat out of focus, but what you're seeing here is a member of a search and rescue team in Haiti holding up his GPS device, showing the OpenStreetMap of Haiti that we had created, and his team was using it to navigate the streets of Haiti in order to get to people who were still caught under debris. And this is a real change, I think, for the social media community, because so much has been said that social media doesn't do a great job beyond spreading the word about things, that it doesn't necessarily mean to a tangible action or tangible change. But I don't think that's really the case anymore when it comes to disaster response, because you now have people who have been able to use social media to coordinate activities related to crises around the world. They've done it for Haiti, they did it for the Chile earthquake as well, and several other disasters such as the floods in Haiti, the floods in Pakistan. And now the next step that we're trying to work on is how to prepare for the next disaster as well. So I just wanted to give you this brief snapshot of what social media has done for disaster response over the last 10 years. And I'm going to be discussing more of this later in a breakout session this afternoon as well. Thank you.